Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Sold Sign podcast with your host, Justin Saunier, and my colleague,
Sheila Kirkpatrick. And we're going to backtrack just a little bit to talk about removing the contingencies of a contract, because last time we spoke about the negotiable items in a contract.
Yep.
So this is the point where it's congratulations, you have an accepted offer. Now we're going to explore the crucial steps that will follow an accepted offer on a home. And thanks for joining us as we guide you through those essential phases, ensuring a smooth journey. It can be stressful, but being prepared is key.
Absolutely.
Whether you are a buyer or a seller, you're going to want to tune into this one.
Yep.
So first, we will talk about the contingency of financing. And when it comes to contingencies as a whole, the common questions that we see as agents is, who is responsible for each item? Is the cost to the buyer, to the seller? What is the responsibilities for each person in this scenario? So first, we're going to talk about financing.
Yes. So the financing clause is essentially when the buyer goes to the bank, they say, I have an accepted offer on this property. I have a pre-approval already in place. I'm submitting in this contract to get proof that I'm qualified to purchase this home. So essentially, they're going to look over the contract, they're going to look over the property, and they will then determine if the home requires an appraisal or not, because they want to make sure that whatever home they're helping this buyer purchase, they want to make sure the value is there.
Yeah. And one of the questions, if you're not prepared, if you're a vendor and you've not heard of an appraisal, and then all of a sudden you get the call and said an appraisal is required on the property, then that seller is, well, why? What's going on? So it's so important to understand that when it comes to appraisals, it's not buyer driven per se or seller driven. It's out of the control. It's the financial institution that's making that decision. And as Justin was saying, they're trying to determine if they feel the value is there. If they're going to lend the money, is the value of the property there? And if so, then the transaction will continue as it's written. However, there are also some times where the appraisal will fall short.
Yep.
And if the appraisal falls short, then that is when you can run into some situations, because then, and again, this could be a whole topic, but with the appraisal, you could actually end up you might have to try to renegotiate, or the buyer may walk away from the sale, and there's just some other things that may happen. But if appraisal goes well, or if it's not even ordered at all, then it's just the buyer and the house as a whole.
Yep. So the bank will essentially give you a letter of finance stating that you have qualified to purchase the home. They send that to you. You hand it off to your agent, who provides it to the seller's agent, and that fulfills that contingency.
Yeah. So number 2 is inspection.
The inspection. Yes.
The inspection, I find an interesting one, because in this market, you'll see a lot less people that are putting a contingency for inspection. But when it comes to, if you are really, really concerned about having an inspection, and in this particular case, we're talking as if there is an inspection.
Yep.
But I just want to give a quick tip in case you want to not put an inspection in the contract, but you want to have the house looked over. So you can actually have someone qualified to look at the property with you. And then that way it would give you more comfort to maybe take the inspection clause out. However, we're moving forward. There's an inspection. Number 1, it's the buyer's expense. Number 2, there's no such thing as a pass or a fail on an inspection.
That is the most important thing to note. It isn't a pass or fail. It's what is going on with the home? What is kind of the history here that the inspector can provide me? And then, do I feel comfortable proceeding with what I know now?
Right. One item that comes up for a buyer versus another buyer, one could be an issue and one may not, because it's in the opinion of the buyer. If there is something that comes up and you're not going to proceed with the sale due to the item, is it something that you could actually get fixed and you would proceed, and then you would try to renegotiate? But if it's a complete deal breaker, then whether the seller likes it or not, you can walk away from the sale at that time. However, most times we do move ahead with everything, and then the inspection contingency is now fulfilled.
So then number 3 would be the sale of buyer's property. Now, this is something, depending on the market, you might not see a lot. So in a seller's market with multiple offers on the table, it's something that is not so common because sellers aren't willing to wait for somebody to sell their home first when there are other people actively ready to immediately purchase.
Yeah.
However, if a property has been sitting on the market for a few months, then a door opens with an opportunity for somebody who may be ready to purchase conditional upon them selling their home.
So days on market are so important when it comes to someone who is looking for a property. They know they want to make a move, but they might not be as comfortable in the crazy market that we're in right now. So days on market is very important in this. And when it comes to sale of a buyer's property, they're almost going through the same steps that we're talking about now. The difference is that the sale of buyer's property, those buyers have first right of refusal on the current contract. So can they proceed with the sale by removing the condition of sale on their property? And they may choose to do that because they just wanted first right of refusal. And then number 4 is insurance. And insurance, I find a tricky one because I see a lot of agents that remove this contingency. And if you're working for the seller, I sometimes caution this and sometimes I counter it back to add an insurance condition. Because if you don't have insurance at the time of closing and you are financing the sale of the property, then the house won't close.
It will not close. Yeah.
So if it's a cash sale, insurance isn't required, but insurance is required when you're financing a sale, which is what a lot of our transactions entail.
Yeah.
So I just think that if you're a seller in this scenario and there's not an insurance condition, make sure that you ask the right questions to your realtor because they don't typically add conditions to the sale. But when it's in your best interest, we do that.
Yes, absolutely. So contingency number 5, which is somewhat similar to the insurance contingency in the sense that if you are getting financing for the home, the bank needs to be assured that there is quality water so that the water is drinkable and it's not contaminated. Otherwise, they're not financing it.
Yeah. And when it comes to water testing, there's 2 types of testing that you can take. So potability is what the bank requires. And then there's something else that is, it's called extended water testing, which is testing all the minerals. So that's when you can see the hardness of the water and things like that. Issue with extended water testing is that it can just take a little bit longer, but if you want to tighten up your timelines or keep them to a tighter timeline, because in this market that's what we want to do, that extended water testing can be rushed. You just have to pay a premium rate, but you can still get it done quickly. So a lot of times people will put out a longer date in those contingencies on water testing for extended testing, but it's not necessary. It might cost you a little bit more, but it might save you in getting your offer accepted.
Absolutely. Contingency number 6, and this being a really important one, is the disclosure statement.
Yeah. So with the disclosure statement, I would say that's seller driven.
Yes. Yep.
And so the seller decides whether they're filling it out or not. And most times you will see that the disclosure is filled out. You will see some rare instances where it might be a bank repo and there may be a rental or an estate. And the reason why it's not filled out in those scenarios would just be because they've not lived in the property. So they don't know the property well. But most times the disclosure is filled out and it's filled out to the best of the knowledge to the seller. And in this disclosure, there are a number of questions. It's a 4-page document. The buyer, in order to fulfill that contingency, they've reviewed the disclosure and sign off on it. But you may see things in the disclosure about right-of-ways, electrical, age of roof, easements, so many items.
Structural, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great, when you're not doing an inspection, it's wonderful to have a disclosure to be able to reference.
It's a great resource to give you a little more history on what the home has been through.
Yeah, exactly. So those I would say are the main contingencies of the contract, but depending on whether you're buying new construction, buying a mini home, land, or condos, multifamilies. We have schedules that will accompany an offer. And within those schedules, there could be additional contingencies pertinent to the type of real estate you're purchasing. And that is its own sheet of paper, and you can add your own contingencies. You can remove these contingencies. You can have as many as you want. You just have to know your audience and know what kind of market you're in and what you're comfortable with. But once all of these contingencies have been completed, then typically I will tell my buyer to now get the deposit ready for the house.
Yeah, it's go time.
Yeah. And some people will have the deposit prior to this because you don't have to have the deposit at a specific time. But once all the contingencies are completed, then we know we're going to start moving forward for closing. So the contingencies is kind of that point where we look at it and go, all right, now deposit is in and now we're sold pending closing date.
Yep. So everything is essentially wrapped up beautifully and firmed. We are just waiting for that closing date to switch over hands.
Yeah. And in wrapping up today's discussion on real estate, the contingencies in Canada, we've highlighted essential conditions, financing to inspections to safeguarding with both buyers and sellers. This information is pertinent for both the buyer and the seller, and understanding who needs to do what, when it needs to be completed. And all these contingencies need to be completed by a certain time stated in the contract, or you could be in breach of contract, which means that the seller can move on to another offer. So it is very important to do these in the time frames that are stated on the contract, or you may be able to get an extension. But customizing these contingencies to fit specific property concerns is the key to a smooth and successful transaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in again to Behind the Sold Sign.
Yes.
Please like, subscribe. Tell us what it is that you want to hear about, because what we're hearing from people is they want to actually know more details like this.
Yeah.
They want to know more about the contract and what it is that they can do to prepare for listing or for buying. And so we're going to listen to what it is that you guys have to say, and we're just going to keep throwing it out there. So tell us what it is that you want to know.
Yes. And again, thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate the support.